Hello, peeps. Welcome back to another episode of the Fly Shit and Scholarship Podcast. I am your host. It's Dr. Meesh, also known as Dr. Tamisha Davis. I am here today with the lovely Dr. Deja Jones. I found Dr. Deja Jones. Actually, I did not find her on Instagram. I was getting ready to lie, but I found her because a couple of years ago, I was headed to a conference for girls, and I don't know how I landed on the sweatshirt, but I saw this sweatshirt that one of my other friends had on, and I forgot what it said actually, but the sweatshirt was like super dope, and I was like, oh, I want that, and I want to wear it to the conference. And so then I got the sweatshirt, and so then sort of been like following your journey. I followed you all the way through your PhD journey. And so I'm so grateful to have you here today. So I'll do a brief introduction and then I'll sort of let Dr. Deja speak for herself. So, Dr. Deja Jones is a Montessori educator and advocate who is passionate about empowering Black children through nature based learning. As the founder and head of school at Honey Pot Montessori in Newark, New Jersey, Dr. Deja integrates Montessori principles with environmental education to nurture young leaders, particularly in urban communities. With over a decade of experience, she focuses on addressing the unique needs of Black children, promoting resilience, equity, and sustainability. Dr. Deja's work, informed by her PhD, is informed by her PhD in transformative social change from Saybrook University, and she has been recognized for advancing education justice and creating inclusive learning environments. Hello, Dr. Deja Jones.
Hi, so happy to be here. I remember that sweatshirt.
Do you remember what it said?
It says teach girls to be somebodies instead of somebodies. And
Yes.
so, I remember that movement that I had going on. That's like 2017. But yeah, Janae. So that's our mutual person, Janae.
Yes. So it has been such a blessing to sort of see your journey through PhD to opening up your own school. So just tell us more about good old Honeypot.
Yeah, so Honeypot, I would say it was my freedom dream in the making. When I first enrolled in my PhD program, which was in 2018, I was teaching full time at a charter school in Newark. I was teaching kindergarten, and it was my second year as a kindergarten teacher. But prior to that, I had been in education for I think about 8, 9 years up to that point. And I had worked with a wide range of students from high school, middle school, and then my last stop was pretty much in early childhood. Um, and being able to work in so many different like levels of education, whether it's a traditional classroom teacher to a curriculum developer to school admin and things like that, it allowed me to see like the politics of education from a bunch of different perspectives. And so when I got to my last stop, which was early childhood, I was also in my PhD program, and I'm thinking about, well, what is my research going to be about? And I zoomed in a lot on just how behavior is managed in urban schools. I know like the school to prison pipeline tends to be a very popular like phrase, but I don't think people really understand what that looks like and what it entails. And it very much is like the policing of children's behavior, but then in a lot of ways those behaviors that children exhibit are just natural inclinations for their age. So most times children are acting in a developmentally appropriate way. However, we've gotten so pressed to close what we call like the achievement gap, that we've taken so much of like the creative thinking, the problem development, the critical analysis that children naturally develop over time out of schools. And it's become a learning ground of like law and order and compliance. And so I was very curious to know like, well, how do we define behavior in our community, and what exactly is behavior? And when children are in positions where they are misbehaving, quote unquote, what is the cause of that? And so for me, environmental racism came up a lot during my studies. And just thinking about how children who are born in poverty and they're living in houses that have been built way before the 1970s, and so you have issues of lead in water, you have issues of like contaminated soil that they're playing in, you have issues of just malnutrition, how those things really impact the cognitive development of children. And so sometimes when you see those impulse control issues, when you see those behavior issues, they're not the child, like, it's not the child directly wanting to misbehave. There's something chemically in that child that is driving them to these different behaviors. And schools have become so disconnected from like the whole child and have become so academic focused that we miss opportunities to really connect with children and their families, and to really develop children into, responsible citizens, as they get older. And so my research kept taking me to environmental racism, and I'm reading about all the deficits, right? All the deficit narratives that are attacked onto our community, what we don't have, what we can't do, who we can't be. And initially, when I started my dissertation, I got through chapter one, which is like your introduction. And, your introduction tends to be a lot of pages. And I got to the literature review, which was a lot of pages. And I just did not feel good about my research. Like, I felt like I was creating more deficit narratives based off of like the research that I was gathering. And I scrapped the whole thing. Like, I talked to my advisor, and I was like, I have to throw this thing in the garbage because it doesn't feel positive. And so I'm like, okay, well, we're talking about how children can't be in nature because it's contaminated, how they can't access it. But what about finding children who do dwell in nature, who do access it more than often? And so my research kind of took a turn. I started to do more studies with small children about what do you do in nature, right? What do you do in it? What do you like about it? Who do you explore nature with? And I got a lot of really great stories from Black children, particularly. And I knew that I wanted having nature embedded in a Montessori space to be a part of Honeypot's foundation. The thing that led me to Montessori is the fact that it is very developmentally appropriate for children. It is an open learning ground that allows children to develop their own sense of discipline. It allows them to develop the will to learn. And so, most times when you walk into a traditional classroom, there are rewards and consequences in a traditional classroom. Where if children are doing well and they're doing what they're supposed to do, you get rewards for it, right? And so then it becomes like a classical conditioning where children begin to perform and they begin to do well because they know that there's going to be a reward attached to it. They also begin to become conditioned to, well, if I do bad things, I'm going to get a consequence. And so what ends up happening is that the child just falls into like this performative space where they're just pleasing people at this point. But there's really no like sense of discipline within themselves and a sense of will within themselves to want to learn. And so Montessori is structured so that the teacher is able to step back and to be able to examine like children's curiosities in the moment. And so you can see in real time when a child is really drawn to mathematics because they're always in the math section, they're always curious about it, and they always want to like explore the materials. And that's an opportunity for a guide. And so in Montessori, we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves guides. It's an opportunity for us to step in and then say, hey, I see you're over here at the math section. Like, what are you interested in learning? And it's an opportunity for us to pull that child. We get the materials and we teach them this concept that they're so curious about right now. Whereas if it's in a traditional classroom and it's literacy hour, but you see a kid at math, then you're going over to the child in math and you're redirecting them to literacy, and they don't want to do literacy right now. And so it's really just teaching children autonomy. It's teaching children how to be leaders in their learning, and it's teaching children how to love learning, right? Because if you don't love something, you're not going to want to do it, regardless of the rewards or the consequences. And so I fell into Montessori in 2019, right before the pandemic, able to do my student teaching hours at a Montessori school in the Bronx. Wildflower, New York. They have Gloria Alston Learning Center, which is a elementary school Montessori school, and I was blown away by the work that they were doing with children. And so I was like, right away, this is like a confirmation to me that this is something that we need in our community. The children at the school in the Bronx, they were first generation. They were English language learners. Come from all different backgrounds, and to just see how they have grown, from then even till now, because I'm still very much connected to the school. See how much it's grown in that was a 5 year period, in a way that's appropriate for them. And so, Honeypot has been, on the journey of opening since 2019, and it's finally something that is in fruition. And we're able to see like the joy of the children wanting to come to school every day. The parents are in love with the school. They're like, "What are you doing to my children?" Like, like my child is 5. They don't want me to help them do anything. They want to get dressed by themselves. They want to help out at the house. And I'm like, those are good things, right? Like those things. Because these are things that they want to do, right? As a parent, you don't have to tell your kid, get up and get dressed in the morning like 45 times. They're up, they're dressed. They want to clean up around the house. They want to help. And so these are some of the skills that Montessori develops in children early on.
Yeah. So tell me this, because those are all like your journey here, I guess, has been accidental, I guess we could call it, right? Like starting in education and knowing you wanted to be in education, but sort of like landing in this spot at Montessori. And so, how, if at all, has that transformed you as an educator, right? Like you've been in different types of school systems and now you're here at Montessori. What has it done for you? Because I think that, we as educators, we always say that this is heart work, right? Which essentially means
Mhm.
that you are doing this work because you're passionate about it and you want to change the lives or invest in everyone else. But in order to
Mhm.
do hard work, you also have to have a whole heart, right? So you have to be a whole
Yep.
person. So how has this transformation into Montessori schooling helped you as an educator or even as a person?
Yeah. Um, so I'm a qualitative researcher. And so one of the things that I really like about myself as a guide being in this Montessori space is that I get to take a ethnographic or auto ethnographic approach to my process, which means that I'm learning as I go with the children. And the one thing that I really love about being in Montessori is the grace that is given not only to children but to myself as an adult. I worked for some very rigorous school districts, and I will say rigorous very lightly. And you're constantly under this pressure to have to perform all the time. You have to meet curriculum deadlines, you have to meet testing benchmarks, and the children are over tested, and then you yourself as a teacher have to sit through strenuous feedback sessions with leadership in a way that makes you feel dehumanized by the time you leave the meeting, and you're leaving feeling like, dang, like maybe I'm a terrible teacher, like I suck. And so, the school system, it really breaks you down as a teacher, but it also breaks the children down. And the thing I really love the most about Montessori is just the humanity in it, where, the way the day is structured, if I like say I came into work and I just had so much going on at home, I'm trying to hold space to show up 100% for my children, and I'm trying to like handle whatever is happening at home. Mine just gives me that space to say, hey, it's okay to step back, right? We have created this open, prepared environment for the child so that they are aware of how they exist in it. The children are moving around, they're working, the school day does not stop. And that can be a day for me to say, okay, so I've given maybe about 40 lessons in the past 3 days. Today, I don't have it in me right now. So I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to sit and I'm going to observe the work of the children. I'm going to sit in my little corner with my observation journal, and I'm going to just scan the room, and I'm going to see, if I taught Tanisha mathematics yesterday using the decimal system, I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch and see how she does that by herself. I'm going to see how she goes to the shelf and sets up her table the way I showed her. I'm going to see how she does the lesson. how many times she can do it, and if she can put the materials back by herself. Or I'm going to see little Timmy over here in the corner. We just did the red rods and we did a whole lesson about length and width. I'm going to see how well he's over there applying that. And so you really get to sit back and you get to observe the child doing the work that they are taught. And you don't have to get up and you're like running all over the classroom and you're just like, oh my God, I have to meet this deadline, that deadline. But then also the children have grace because they are taking their time with these concepts that they're learning. They're not rushing through lessons, they're not rushing through concepts. They're very much working towards self mastery first before step in and say, okay, well, this is how we can either advance this lesson or how we can like go back and go over some concepts again that they might need help with. And so, like, I love how Montessori embraces the humanity of people, right? Of the child, of the teacher, of the parents. And so I think it's really transformed me in a way that I'm able to take care of like myself on a wellness level, but then also it's giving me like the mentality that children are people, right? And I think as adults we get into this hierarchy of like, oh, I'm the adult and you're the child. Whatever I say goes. But I think Montessori very much evens the playing field to a certain extent, where not only are the children learning from me, I'm also learning from them. And we're in this community together, and this is a communal space. And so it's really allowed me to like show up as my best self, show up as myself, and not have to put on like a performance, like most schools really require you to do. And so I really love the ease of it and the slow burn of
Yeah.
Montessori.
I like that you said that because in a sense, if you cannot be taken care of and if you're consistently sort of beating to the drum of quick standards, fast pace, rigidness, then it does decrease your morale, right? And
Hmm.
that's not in the world of teaching only, that's in any sort of job place, right? Like if I feel that something is too rigid and too many rules and too many standards, then that sort of induces some levels of anxiety within me because
Hmm.
most of the times people want to do well, right?
Yeah.
Contrary to what we believe about many people and their intentions, like most people have a starting point of wanting to do well and wanting to succeed and excel in any of the things that they do. But we don't recognize as systems and as environments sometimes that we can all have the same goal. But if your way of trying to push me towards that goal is sort of these rigid like practices and policies. Every day you got to turn in a teaching plan or a lesson plan. You got to do this, and our test scores need to be this, and all of these things. And it does create a sense of pressure. And a lot of teachers are in pressure cookers every day, and so that it's frustrating. And I think for me, being a social worker and have been a social worker in the school setting, I'm always kid first, right? So there's this level of me where I need more from teachers, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, hey, I need more. I need you to be more empathetic. I need you to be more patient. I need you to be all of these things. But their environments is not creating the space to do that. And so I like to hear you say that Montessori possibly offers another opportunity for that. It's not just a holistic perspective for the child, but a holistic perspective for everybody involved, right?
Yep.
Um, which brings me sort of to my context or my question of like, how do we get here? I feel like Montessori, like I heard about it years ago,
Hmm.
and I'm starting to feel that it's becoming more popularized in a sense. And so how do we get here all of a sudden?
How do we get to Montessori, or how can we get to Montessori?
So how did we get here to the point
Mm-hmm.
where something that has been around for a very long time, which you can provide us some context to now you can Google, depending on where you are, right? Depending on where you are, and find multiple Montessori schools. And I feel like there's a growing pattern. So, how did we get to Montessori schools in the first place? Like, where did this sort of model come from, right? Because it's very much not traditional to our traditional school setting. So, how did we get here, and how come it's becoming so popular?
Yeah, so I will say that the one classroom the one classroom model of learning, it is not new to us as Black people. Preschool integration, it was the way we learned, right? We learned in a one classroom with one teacher, kids from 3 to like 12 in the same classroom, and it built community, right? Children are learning together. But then also, it's an opportunity for children who are older to take on leadership roles, whereas children who are smaller have something to aspire to with the older children. And so Montessori has a one classroom model where we have infant toddler, where you have children from birth to 2 years old in a similar classroom. And then you have primary, where you have children from 3 to 6 together. And then you have your lower, your upper elementary, your adolescent, well into high school. And so this model of learning is not new. It has been around in our community for centuries, decades. I think now the reason why like we don't see ourselves in Montessori spaces is because so just going back to like Maria Montessori, it's named after Maria Montessori. She's a neuroscientist. She became a neuroscientist in Italy during a time where it was just not the track for women. If you're a woman and you're pursuing a career, you were a secretary, you were a typist, like those types of jobs. And she took the road less traveled for herself, became a scientist to the point where when she was doing her clinicals, she was pre-med, she had to take her classes at night after all the men had left already. Now she had to go and do like her classes by herself late at night. And so one of her first jobs was at an asylum. And during this time, asylums were not based on gender, age. They kind of threw everyone into the same building. And she noticed that the children were just so filthy. They were so down. Like the morale of the children were just so low. And so Montessori essentially started off as her empowering children through practical life skills, how to take yourself, how to groom yourself, personal hygiene. And so one of the components of Montessori that you can see today is in our practical life section. But it also has like a developmental process to it where children are also developing their fine and gross motor skills through some of the lessons in practical life that's going to prepare them to do the language and the math. Um, and so pretty much the method was so successful at the asylum that it was something she took out into the community. Um, and now, like, when she took it out to the community, she was in like the slums of Italy, right? This was a method that she intended for people who did not have the access to be doctors, lawyers, scholars. She took this method to the community of people who needed it the most. I think the issue with Americans, and it is probably an unpopular opinion, um, we got so excited. And when I say Americans, I don't mean like we like brown people. White people, right? They got so excited about this method that they were flying their teachers from the US to Italy to learn directly from Maria Montessori.
Oh, wow.
And come back to the States and they would implement it. And obviously, during that time, where we were. We were not in classrooms. We were on the fields. We were picking cotton. And so, this method, when it came to the US, it was never intended for us to have. Um, and so, I think the reason why it is so gatekeep, the reason why when you Google Montessori and you don't see our children and our faces in the classrooms, is because it was never intended for us to use. And even just on a political level, just looking at policies in the state of New Jersey does not recognize Montessori as a method of learning. If you are not in compliance with the state, you're not able to access the federal funds that come with it. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
that goes back to the access. Like, why aren't there a lot of Montessori schools in urban communities? And it's because we can't afford to have them there, and they do
Mm.
beautiful. Um, and so, like the reason why we're seeing it now, I think the pandemic really exacerbated to parents that what we have been learning, like I grew up in public schools, our parents grew up in public schools, and now our children are in public schools. I think parents are really starting to just become more aware of it not working, right? It's not working. Um, and it's not working because we're reinventing the wheels over and over again. But we're reinventing the wheels in a box that still benefits the benefactor, right? Like if you're throwing thousands of dollars into companies for corporate curriculum, the corporations don't want to lose that money. And so they rework the curriculum and send it to you a different way, but the outcome is still going to be the same. I also think that we have so much bureaucracy in our education system that people don't want to give up the power that they sit on to empower somebody else. And so if you're a superintendent or a school principal and you're making well into the six figures, but you know that if you do away with a lot of the things in the schools that don't work, you're going to lose a lot of money, which is fueling those salaries. You don't want to give that up. And so I think the reason why the public school system is so resistant to the changes is because people are going to lose money.
Mm.
Um, but a lot of parents are seeing that what's happening in the school systems are not working. I was reading an article maybe about a couple months ago just about how school enrollment has decreased significantly. And people are wondering, well, where are the children going? People are sending their kids to private schools. People are sending their children to homeschool learning pods, which is very similar to Montessori. And so I think we're seeing Montessori now more than ever is because parents want choices. They want to see what else can I send my kid to that's going to really help my child. And so, we're really starting to see a shift in education.
Yeah.
I with this new administration coming in, it's going to be an even bigger shift. And so a lot of people are on edge about am I going to have my job as a teacher at a public school or am I not? And so it's a really interesting time. But yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you say to the barrier piece, right? Because what I hear you saying, and I'm automatically thinking of students with disabilities and sort of like behavior challenges and developmental delays, etc. And you've sort of described the origins of Montessori as focusing on that group of kids, really, right? Because that's where we used to put kids in asylums, etc. Back, years ago when we weren't so, integration and inclusive ed, we separated them. And in many ways, we still do. So I hear that the origins of this sort of model was particularly for that demographic and sort of to teach life skills, etc. And so I can imagine that as time has gone on, that it has continued to be a sort of safer space for them. But again, I consistently think of the gatekeeping and the barriers. And so my first follow-up question is how does Montessori sort of approach that demographic now that it's not Montessori's sole population of interest, right? So it started that way and now it's sort of been integrated and so all sorts of types of kids can go to Montessori, but how does it sort of remain protection of that individual population?
Yeah, so the way the Montessori curriculum is structured, it's so that every child has an individual learning plan or individual educational pathway. And so it's an IEP, but it's not like the traditional district form of what an IEP is. So it kind of breaks down like the competition in the classroom. It also acknowledges that children learn differently. And so while some children might go through concepts very quickly and can move on to new things, there are some children who might need weeks, months to master a concept, and that's why I really like the slow burn of it. Um, I've had children in my classroom who are diagnosed with ADHD, which it's hard. Structure is hard for them. It's hard for them to sit, focus, all those things. But the way the Montessori classroom is structured, it allows for them to have those moments where they can get up and move around when they need to. And they can come back to their learning plan, once they've kind of like had their moment. We've had children in our classroom who came in with language delays, speech delays, just all kinds of developmental delays. And, the thing with Montessori is that it recognizes that children are going to develop at their own pace,
Mm.
but it's easier for children to develop in environments where they're able to socialize together. Um, not so much as like the adult doing so much of the heavy lifting. Um, Homegirl that had the speech delay, I understand a single thing she said. Her first month of school, and I'm looking at my business partner, and I'm just like, girl, don't know if this is gonna work.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm not SPED certified, and neither was my partner. And I was like, we don't. And I'm looking at the kids, and they're just like, she said, and I'm like, how do you know what she's saying? I don't. It's baby talk babble, but like they understood what she was saying, and they're
Yeah.
they're like they're my interpreters. And it's so interesting because as time went on in the classroom, her speech improved so much to the where she was able to speak full sentences. She could tell you a story. She tell you exactly what she wanted, where she wanted to go. She's socializing with the other children in the class, and her parents were ready to put her in like speech pathology. They were ready to give so many services to her, and they were just like, "We don't understand what you're doing with my daughter, but her language is so good." And it was
Hmm.
like smart mouth at home, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And so I really love to see like moments like that.
Yeah.
If she was in the traditional school, I can imagine the number of labels that would
Mm.
be attached to her, just because she's not wasn't in the place where she could communicate effectively just yet. And so, schools are really quick to diagnose children instead of just giving time for the developmental process to kick in for them. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, Montessori, it really honors where children are at in that moment. Like the
Yeah.
moment you walk into those doors, this is who you are, this is where you are at. And our job as guys is to cultivate that so that you can begin your process of development, right? We don't have a destination in mind for you. Like by the end of this year, you're going to be here. Like we don't do that. We just say, here's how we're going to help your child develop, and here's what we are going to be doing with them in their development process. And
Hmm.
so I really like the fact that a kid can enroll in my class at 3, and I'll have them all the way up until they're 6. And the way the materials are structured in the classroom, the materials build onto itself, and it gets more and more advanced as the child advances, as
Yeah.
they're able to do things. And so, like I said, it really breaks down that notion of having kids in an inclusive classroom, and we're saying, oh, well, this child is a low, this child is a medium, this child is a high. Like we don't do those labels. And like I said, we recognize where you are the moment you walk in, and we help you on your developmental pathway.
Yeah. And one of the things that you've said, which there's so much beauty in, is this idea of patience, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many other settings, there is no time, right? There
Yeah.
is no time for that. So you have a student that comes in with a developmental delay, and we do all of these sort of early interventions, which is great, right? And which is needed, but the the ultimate drive is to meet a goal, right? And whether
Mm-hmm.
that goal is for the student, whether that goal is for testing purposes or my job purposes. And so there's always a hurry. And I think even with the way that the grade systems are structured, I mean, they've done a little work over time to sort of restructure the way that we think about leaving kids back and moving kids on. So now they have like keep back years. So a kid in public schools, they can't be kept back every year. So there might be like when you get to fifth grade, if you don't do so well, we can keep you back. But they're keep back years. And so I think that there's starting to be some understanding that sometimes development takes time. But I like this idea of doing that early on, right? To say,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to target some of these things and give you some supports, but to acknowledge that sometimes, it may be a developmental disability, which essentially means you'll have to manage it for the rest of your life, but it may just be a developmental delay, and we want you to sort of coast through that or grow through that at a pace that's very familiar and unique to the child, which I think is child centered. And I think that that's great.
Mm-hmm. And those are conversations that we've constantly had to have with parents because, like I said, many of us came through a school system where there were deadlines, there were standardized tests, there were benchmarks that we had to meet. And so, for a parent, it can be very frustrating when you are new to Montessori and you don't understand like how the process is, and you have an expectation on what you feel your child should be doing by X amount of time and by Y amount of time. And so these are conversations that we've had to have a lot with parents. I had a kid who came to the school at 3 years old and he didn't know his numbers. And we spent a great deal of the school year just getting him familiar with quantities, just getting him familiar with the number sense of 1 to 10. And, for his parent, it was very frustrating because they were just like, we don't understand, like what's happening. Why doesn't he know his numbers? Like, and we're just like, it's more than just not knowing your numbers. Like it's a whole process that a child goes through for them to understand like what a quantity of a number is versus what the number looks like. And so sometimes it's like singing like the ABC song, right? Like a lot of children at 2, 3 years old, they're singing the ABC song because they know the melody and they know the lyrics. But when you put the alphabet in front of them, it's like gibberish, right? Like what are these? And we're just like, well, these are letters, right? And you've been singing the ABC song, so I'm going to show you what the ABCs look like now. Or you've been counting, but now I'm going to show you what those numbers look like. And so sometimes it's about we call it the passage to abstraction. So children from the time they begin to talk, they know 1,000 words, right? Because they've absorbed so much from their surroundings, and so they know how to speak, they know how to say the words, but they don't know how to read the words. And so the purpose of us is to make the connections, right? Like you've been saying all these words since you were 3. Now I'm going to show you what these words look like. And so, sometimes it's a process, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen in a month's time. Like sometimes children just really need the time that a traditional school wouldn't give them. And so I try to make that comparison to parents where I let them know that if your child was in a traditional classroom, it would appear that they knew what they were doing because the work is structured for children to not have to do so much of the heavy lifting. If they're doing multiple choice worksheets or fill in the blank worksheets and things like that, like the worksheet is doing the heavy lift for them, and they're just filling in the blanks and coloring the correct answer and things like that, and it's passing them along. And so when they get to a grade where they actually have to apply the concept and the skills, and they can't do it, that's when people start to see the learning, like what the learning delay, but they can't pinpoint when the learning delay started. Like my first year as a classroom teacher, I taught ninth grade English at a high school. And we're doing diagnostic tests with the children at the beginning of the year, and they're testing on third grade reading levels, first grade reading levels. And I'm like, this is high school. This didn't just start here. Like there's somewhere where some delays were happening that was not caught. And so now that they have to perform on a level at which they are required to, you're starting to see those holes and those gaps. Montessori really catches it early, and it gives time for the development to happen.
Yeah. What happens to the kids? Because here's what I'm imagining, right? Most of what I've come across for Montessori has been lower grade levels, right? So younger ages up to 5-ish, and then sort of like this transition into whatever it may be for you to go to next, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Montessori or the environment of the Montessori school system is so different from traditional school settings, what typically happens to the child? Because one of the questions that I always see or read, because I sort of like think of all of these educational systems, but one of the things that I often see or read is, well, okay, that's great, right? My kid can be
Mm-hmm.
outside and play in the trees and do all of these things that they do at Montessori schooling, but then they got to go to real school, right? And they won't be prepared for real school. And so, how have you, in your own practice or sort of in your research, come to understand the transitional point from Montessori into more traditional school settings?
It is very much a rocky transition,
Okay.
um, because the Montessori curriculum, I would say, when done with fidelity, like the way that Montessori is structured, a 6-year-old is leaving a Montessori classroom with at least a second or third grade learning capability. Because at 6 years old, we've already begun to introduce the child to the practice of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, long division. They're understanding the decimal system. They're understanding parts of speech. They're understanding sentence structure and things like that. And so it's hard for a 6 year old to have such a big capacity and then go to a traditional public school and you're being placed in the first grade where they haven't even started teaching those concepts yet. And you're kind of just back into like a level that is like beneath you because like this is how the school district is designed. Even when I was in traditional schools, I would have children in my class who were well beyond the curriculum. And it was a fight, even in the traditional classroom, to get these children skipped because the misconception is that, oh, well, it's going to impact them developmentally and socially. And I'm like, children are some of the most adaptable creatures like in our race. I feel like us as adults, we have a hard time with shifts and changes and things like that. But children are naturally inclined to want to socialize with wherever they are. And so there have been times where I've advocated with parents to get children skipped. Test these children out of this grade and let them move on and be great. And so that's something that we constantly deal with. We've had children go from Honey Pot to schools like Pingree, St. Benedict's, and we've created a portfolio for that child of all the work they've done in the Montessori classroom, all the lessons they've mastered, all the things they know how to do, and we give it to parents and recommendation letter, and we say, listen, whatever you need, let us know. Like
Yeah.
advocate for your child and what they can do, let us know
Yeah.
because I will do it. I will be at that classroom, at that school, and I'm like, listen, because like I said, I've worked in so many different spaces of education that I really know the politics of it, and I'm like, let me know where I have to go.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear from you is the opposite of what I thought you meant by Rocky. So you're saying Rocky in the sense that, hey, the kids are so well prepared that they
Hmm.
go and they're often ahead of what they're supposed to be. And it's hard to get them in settings that sort of match their educational growth or educational standard, which is crazy. Um, and so I'm assuming that the transitional period happens and there's some sort of adaptability. Do you see there being a change in sort of the trajectory of Montessori over the next couple of years? And so I think in our conversations before, I heard you say that there are some Montessori based high schooling and et cetera, but not as common. Do you see there being a change in other areas where that becomes more popular? Or do you think that we're in the sort of let's get used to what we're doing right now phase?
No, I honestly think there's going to be a rapid increase in Montessori because there's so many different movements that are happening to cultivate those spaces, particularly for Black people. If you look at the school system in Washington, D.C., they have a plethora of public Montessori schools that are 100% free for children to attend elementary, middle school, high school. Um, and then they also recently, I think it's called the Washington Montessori Institute. They just launched a partnership with Howard University to get people in their teacher program also trained in Montessori. There's also a few colleges and universities that have started to create Montessori credentialing programs where you can essentially graduate with a bachelor's and a master's in Montessori education. There's also a lot of different foundations and organizations that help people get certified and trained in Montessori, but also help them open their own micro schools. And so, one of Honeypots, we're affiliated with the Wildflower Foundation. They were the first organization that we reached out to in 2019 to start the process. Um, they have well over 60 something Montessori schools across the country, and it grows rapidly every year. And they have, I think, about 12 in Puerto Rico. And so this is something that people have really become drawn to, like as educators. We've really become drawn to the Montessori method because of like its humanizing qualities and because it's such a great method. um, there's also the Black Wildflowers Fund, which is a philanthropy, their foundation, and they give grants to Black people who are interested in getting trained and licensed in Montessori. They'll cover your tuition, books, whatever you need. There's also a startup grant that they have that will help you start your own micro school. The Wildflower Foundation also gives grants and small interest loans to your school startup journey. There's the Black Montessori Fund, which also gives grant money towards your credentials and your license. But also, if you are a parent and you're interested in enrolling your child in a Montessori school, they'll give you a grant scholarship for tuition to cover tuition for a certain amount of time. And so there's so many different things that are popping up that's trying to make Montessori a possibility in these communities. Right now, within the Wildflower Foundation, they've launched charter cohorts where they're working with teachers who are interested in opening free public Montessori schools in their community. And I mean, I won't say unfortunately because I'm not anti-charter.
Yeah.
I want to disclaim that. I just I just don't like those really big network charters because they operate in such uniformity that it takes away like the human process. However, Wildflower is a decentralized network, which means that if you are a school leader, head of school, a teacher leader, that is your business. You are designing that school. They have no say in it. They will not give you a bylaw, a rule, or a regulation that is specifically your school to design in a way that meets the needs of the community that you are in. And so there's not two wildflower schools that's going to look the same. There's four,
Ah.
and some people have different language immersion programs depending on where their school is located. Some people have nature, some people have Afrocentric Montessori structures. And so it really just depends on where you are, your community, what your community's needs are. And so they have launched a series of charter cohorts that will essentially help teachers understand the chartering process in their communities to start free public Montessori schools.
Yeah.
One of the schools that I mentioned earlier, the Gloria Alston Learning Center, which is Wildflower in New York, I actually sit on the board as their treasurer, and they are under the SUNY Charter School Institute. And so just to see how they are offering and providing free Montessori education to
Mm.
children in the Bronx. Many of these children are English language learners, and the Bronx has a lot of narratives that are attached to it. And so, just to see how they are thriving and they're offering these free models of education to children, and parents are paying for it, um, it's actually encouraged the New York City Department of Education to start thinking about opening district Montessori schools. And so, this upcoming fall, the New York City Department of Education are actually opening their first Montessori school, like their first district backed Montessori.
Wow.
Mhm.
I
Because they've
love that.
mhm, because they've seen the work of Wildflower in New York, and
Yeah.
they've actually sent a few of their teachers there to get trained to be able to open with the district. And so you're really starting to see a shift
Mm.
happen, um, a need for Montessori, and then it's this idea of expansion, right? Because we
Yeah.
know education should not be one size fit all. And
Yeah.
so you really have to make space for other methods of learning and allow parents and families to have choices.
Yeah, and how much that aligns to educational policies, right? Like I
Mhm.
know that we are in the thick of not really knowing what's going to happen to the Department of Ed over the next couple of years, but what we do know is as it stands, the policy says that everyone should have free and equal access to education, right? And
Mhm.
nothing about that says that your education should be better than mine because you live in a
Right.
particular area or your parents have more money than mine. But we know that as it stands, that's what we've been dealing with. That if
Mhm.
you are underprivileged or black or brown or with a disability or you're living in poverty, you're just not getting
Yeah.
the resources and the education, right? The strong
Mhm.
education that you should be getting that equates to your peers, your white peers, your rich peers, right? And New Jersey is very interesting in the way that they district, right? I'm from DC. I went to PG County schools in high school. And so there was the county the school board is for the entire county, right? So essentially, what that means is your tax dollars are investing in the county, right? So when you pay your housing taxes and all of these things, you are investing in the county. In New Jersey, the school boards are ran by cities. So if you are, I'm not very familiar with North Jersey, but sort of down here in Mercer County, there is Ewing, there is Trenton, there is Princeton, there is Hamilton, I think, and some other places. But as you can imagine, the school system in Princeton looks very, very different from the school system in Trenton. And so I'm happy to hear that you're saying, hey, we know this thing works. We know that it's helpful. We know that it's ideal. We also know that traditionally it has been exclusionary and very expensive. I mean, I look at schools all the time, just planning purposes, and I'm like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
$2,500, $2,600, like, and then they don't even tell you the monthly. They just tell you what it costs to go there for the year. And I'm looking at some of
Yep.
these prices, and they're the equivalent of a college education.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep. Very
so
much.
essentially what we're saying is, hey, we know this works, but there are a certain population of people who deserve it. So I'm so happy to hear that there are ways in which Montessori education is becoming more freely accessible to all children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the event that you are in an area or can't access the resources to apply for the grant, or you're not in New York City to benefit from the public ed
Yeah.
that they're going to be doing, what are some things that parents can do for their children at home to sort
Mm-hmm.
of you can't really cultivate the same environment because teachers are trained to be teachers for a reason and parents are parents. But are there any things that you can offer as suggestions for parents to do at home that may be beneficial to them if they cannot access the Montessori setting?
Yes. So I always tell parents that the difference with Montessori and traditional school is that Montessori is so close to the homeschool experience. And so it's so easily adaptable from classroom to house. So there are two books that parents can get. And so if you have a child that is infant toddler, and so we're looking at birth to 2 years old, there's a book called The Montessori Baby. It's by a woman named Simone Davies. And then she also has another book called The Montessori Child, which is for 2.5 to 6 years old. And this is like a book you can get on Amazon. And I don't think it's more than like $15, like both books, but books have lessons in them, like actual Montessori lessons. And so you're getting like lesson plans on Montessori that you can do at home, where you can utilize household materials. So like beans, maybe spaghetti noodles for like math and sensorial work. A lot of the materials in the Montessori classroom, especially when you get to the language section, are actually handmade, and the tutorial section, they're handmade. And so part of my training as a Montessori teacher, getting working towards my license, we were doing a lot of handmade making things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we like even with our lesson plan books, they're binders. Like we have binders of lesson plans that we had to write, put them in the binder with pictures and drawings and colorings of the work. And so everything is so thoughtful that if I were to give a parent one of my binders and say, "Hey, take this home and try it with your kid," it's so easy to do, right? And so those two books. Amazon also has really great Montessori materials. And so you can like Google like the red rods or the pink tower, or like we have what's called binomial cube, trinomial cube, like magnetic letters, like all these things, like you can get those on Amazon for cheap. When I was going through my training, I was very much not working. I was on a tight budget. So I was on Amazon. I had
Yes.
Amazon boxes coming to the house every day because we would have to practice with the materials on camera during class. And so I was constantly ordering Montessori materials, Montessori materials. But then at the grocery store, because, if I'm doing a lesson on sorting with a child, I can get like three different type of beans, and we can sort by the bean category. We can get different types of pastas, sort by pastas, and so I would definitely suggest those two books because
Okay.
they're chock full of Montessori lessons, and then also just Montessori materials that you can get on Amazon. And so if a child is learning, let's say, addition in school, and they're learning 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, you can then either enhance that lesson by doing some Montessori work with it at home.
Smart.
You're teaching like the patterns of like adding and subtracting in the household in the Montessori way. Because I know sometimes like a free education is a free education, right? And if you don't have the means, you gotta do it.
Right.
Some parents also take time at home to advance their children's or enhance their child's learning. And so, even if you can't afford a Montessori school, you can still do Montessori at home. It doesn't have to be such a gatekeep experience. I get DMs all the time on Instagram
Yeah.
asking for suggestions. Like if a parent is telling me their kid is struggling with a concept in school, they'll ask me, is there any material or something they can get that will help? And I'm always directing them to something that they can buy on Amazon or even something they can make at home to like those lessons.
Yeah, you need an Amazon storefront because that would make that
I know.
all easy for you to just
Said
say,
that
hey,
before.
like, here's and it may help. I mean, it may be less work for you to like have to like,
Mm-hmm.
constantly come up
Absolutely.
with something, but I think that's very helpful in even the piece you said about, hey, they may be in a traditional school setting and struggling with the concept, and you can still use the Montessori principles and some of the activities to kind of like egg them on and to help them make progress. My next sort of thing for you is more personal, which is how are you doing all of this? How are you sort of running a school, programming? Like, how do you do it and then still maintain your sanity?
It is by the hairs of my chinny chin chin. um, honestly, I ask myself that every day because I'm like, there's no way possible. Like, because I mean, I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier, like I kind of stumbled here accidentally. I really did stumble here accidentally. Like, when I enrolled in my PhD program, having a school was not on my plan.
Yeah.
Um, and when I left the traditional school I was working at, people were just like, "Have you considered being a principal?" And I'm like, "No." I was like, "I do not want that responsibility. Like, I would not want to be responsible for an entire school."
Yeah.
And now here I am with one.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I done jumped over principal to like something else. And I don't feel like I feel like it is an assignment. I feel like it is my assignment. I feel like this is something that God has like given me
Hmm.
to do. And it no matter how many times I have tried to like get away from it, like I can't do this, I don't want to do this anymore. I keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Um because this is I mean, and this is essentially like the work that I'm supposed to be doing. Like I love working with children. I love working with their families. Um it's been to the point where during a typical school day where I have children with older siblings and they might be out of school for the day and the parent is like, well, can I drop my kid off there too? I'm like, sure, bring
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And it's like, should I pack a lunch? I'm like, no, just drop them off, like we have food here. And so there have been times where to me it's family, it's about family and community. um and I feel like when you're doing work that you actually enjoy and you get joy out of seeing the results and the outcome, it doesn't really feel like work. Like
100%.
yeah, like I love putting together programs and just seeing the kids have fun. We did a Saturday nature program, which was originally it was for honey pot children, but a lot of the parents were just like, well, can I have a 7-year old, I have an 8-year old, I have a 12-year old, can they come too? And I'm like, you know what, sure, bring them too. And we're at Bridgebrook Park in Newark. We're outside on Saturdays from 11 to 1, just outside doing nature focused activities. it was a drop off, so parents can very much drop off and have a few hours to themselves on a Saturday. But what ended up happening was the parents didn't want to leave. Like they wanted to protect you and they wanted to have fun because the one thing Montessori has done for me has like really alivened my inner child. Like I get to be a kid all day, just like the kids, and you get to really enjoy the wonders of childhood. And I think the
Yeah.
parents really want that too. And so the parents were staying and they were staying. And when we would have downtime, you would see the parents organizing a game of tag, freeze tag with the kids, trying to introduce them to like some of the games we played as kids.
Yeah.
And so it was a really fun experience. And I feel like I am able to find a balance between like the programming and like the running of the school because like they're one and the same. But then also, like I said, Montessori gives grace, right? It gives you the time to be a person, right? I'm a guide to the children in this learning space, but I'm also a person. Um, so I've taken on like the spirit of gym rat. Like I love going to the gym, and on days where I don't go, I feel bad. Like, dang,
Yeah.
I should have gone today. And so it's definitely becoming a habit of me going to the gym, me taking my supplements, drinking my shakes, taking my pre-workout, my protein, and so meal prepping. And
Yeah.
so those are things that kind of, keep me grounded. It gives me a routine to keep me like on track with my wellness. And then, when work gets too much, I don't have to do much, but just pull out a meal prep, put it in the microwave. And so, yeah, and then it's also like my weekends are like my weekends. Like if you are
Smart.
hitting if you
Smart.
are
Smart.
hitting me
Smart.
up on a Friday at 4 p.m., you are not going to get a response until Monday.
Absolutely.
Like if
Boundary
you are hitting,
setting.
yes, if you are hitting me up during the week after 4, you're not getting a response until the next day. And
Yeah.
so I really had to take myself out of this urgency with technology where it's like when you get a text message or you get an email, you have to rush and respond without boundary, right? So you're texting people at 8, 9 o'clock at night, sending emails at 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning. That's not okay. And so I cut that off. Like I've had to cut it off because before it was just open field. Like call me anytime, text me anytime. And then I'm getting calls from parents on like Saturday night. And it's just like, really, like, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes the parents love to push a button, especially for teachers, you know.
Mhm.
And I think it's a push of a button, but I think it's also a testament to the work that you're doing and the environment that you've created, which is not very easy to do. And
Yeah.
I think what you're describing is sort of this cycle, right? You
Mhm.
are in the setting that you're in so that it can provide you with some of the opportunities to do the things that you need to do for yourself, right? To go to the gym and to meal prep and to focus on you, which allows you the opportunity to do your hard work from a place that is truly connecting to what your purpose is. And I think that that's amazing, but a testament also to the freedom that you've awarded yourself by taking on this journey, which I think is amazing.
Mhm. Yeah. Because working, I'll be honest with you, I know education is going to shift a lot.
Yeah.
Um, the pandemic, there was the massive teacher like exiting, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's only going to get worse. More and more teachers are leaving because they don't feel seen, they feel burnt out, run
Yep.
down, and you find yourself at a crossroads where it's just like, I love the kids, I want to stay for the kids, but I'm not well. Like I'm
Yeah.
not well. I don't see my family at home often because I'm at work all day. And when I'm home, I'm doing more work. I'm tired, and so a lot of people are saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Figure out my next journey in life, right? I don't, it's not going to be teaching, but
Yeah.
I figure out something else to do. And so you
Absolutely.
do that a lot, and it's a shame because, you have this teacher shortage where schools are having anywhere between 20 to 40 job openings in the middle of the year, and there are kids who are being taught by long-term subs who don't have the experience. They're just wanting the money. And so yeah, it's a shame, but hopefully like with this wave of like Montessori, um, things will change. I've even spoken to the New Jersey Department of Education, the early childhood department, And they're even thinking about ways to expand our thinking around early childcare. Um, one of the ladies that I spoke to, she is very much interested in how outdoor forest schools are effective in child development because if it comes down to a place where they're able to get licensed, I know Colorado recently passed a policy that's licensing outdoor education to get federal funding. That's something that will help a lot of schools thrive to be able to have that experience where children can be outside 50% of the day, doing methods like Montessori, and then there's another method called Reggio Emilia. And the kids are able to be outside at least 50% of the day, and they're still getting their math and their literacy and their writing and their core skills.
Yeah.
But they're able to also have the outdoor nature experience that really helps with their physical and their mental health.
That's pretty cool. And I think, speaking to your point about the teacher shortage is crazy. I remember, I think it was one year Patterson was hiring for teachers, and the teacher shortage was so bad that the amount, like the bonuses they were offering for
Mhm.
sign on, I'd never seen nothing like that.
$4,000, $4,000
For
sign-on bonuses.
just to
Nor can
convince
go
people to come
that.
to
Mhm.
work. So I hope that, because I think that there's a lot of people who truly want to be educators, and I hate that the system is not conducive to them doing their hard work and
Mhm.
simultaneously taking care of themselves. And so I'm truly hopeful that this shift will not only create a new pathway for our kids, but also the people that want to do the work.
Yeah.
Um, so before we go, what is next for Honeypot? Like, what do you see for it? I know that you guys are considered a mini micro school right now. So what is your ultimate dream for Honeypot?
Um, so Honey Pie is primary, so we're 2.5 to 6 years old. My biggest dream for Honey Pot is for us to have a building, like a big building where we're able to expand to higher grades. Because like I said, we have parents with older children and they're just like, we wish that you had like elementary school or middle school that we can send our kid to. And so that is the ultimate goal, is to be like a standalone school that is pre-K all the way up to 8th grade, possibly even 12th grade, where kids can have like the access to a Montessori education and not have to like transition from Montessori and then go back to traditional. And so that is like my ultimate goal for Honeypot, is for it to continuously grow. Um, for us to have some elementary certified people wanting to man a classroom, and then having some adolescents trained people wanting to man a classroom. So that is my biggest goal.
I love it. And I can see it for you. Like I said, I've watched you, in silence for quite a long time. And I think that everything that you said that you're going to do, you've done. So I have massive amounts of faith in you. And I think it's needed. And I think
Mhm.
you are doing the work because you are bringing something that has been proven, that the research is there, that is helpful specifically for our kids, and making it accessible to them. And I think that that's the beauty in the work that you've done. You didn't sort of learn all of this information and take your talents into communities that don't benefit us, right? You learned all of this information and you took your talents to the communities that needed it the most. And that is extremely honorable. And I really, really can't wait to see more.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure. I am sure I'll probably pull on your heartstrings a little more in the future once Honeypot starts to, do other things. I'm going to come back with questions and like, okay, well, what about
Yeah.
this? And what about this? But I do
Yeah.
appreciate you taking your time to sit with us today, and to provide some resources that I think are going to be super duper helpful. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.